My name is Alex Parker, and that night altered the course of my life in ways I never expected. Up until that moment, my roommate, Chris, had always been just a friend, someone I shared rent and space with, someone I could rely on for late-night laughs and mutual complaints about assignments, nothing more. But when I woke up that night, something was different. At first, it was subtle, just an odd feeling in the air, a quiet shift in energy. I wasn't fully awake yet, still drifting somewhere between sleep and reality. But then, I noticed it. His gaze. It lingered on me for just a beat too long. His voice, when he finally spoke, carried a softness that sent an unfamiliar shiver down my spine. I didn't realize it at that moment, but while I had been lost in my dreams, Chris had done something that neither of us could take back. It was a moment so delicate, yet so monumental, that it would alter our friendship forever. And what startled me most? I wasn't sure I wanted to resist it, but before we dive deeper, don't forget to hit subscribe and support LGBTQ+ voices. Stories like this, stories of self-discovery, longing, and connection, deserve to be told. Your support helps bring these narratives to life and keeps our community's voices heard. Thank you for being here. Now let's begin. The night had been like any other. The silver moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting intricate patterns across the walls. The hum of the city outside had faded into the background, and the apartment was silent except for the rhythmic ticking of the clock on my desk. The exhaustion of the day weighed heavy on my body. A marathon of lectures, back-to-back assignments, and a late-night study session had drained me completely. The second my head hit the pillow, sleep wrapped around me like a thick, comforting fog. I was deep in dreams when something pulled me toward consciousness. At first it was just a whisper of sensation, barely noticeable, a light brush against my arm. My mind tried to dismiss it as a remnant of my dreams, but then it came again. A touch, intentional, real. A quiet stir of awareness rippled through me. My breath deepened, my senses sharpening as I registered the warmth near me. Chris. He was close. Too close. In the dim glow of the moonlight, his silhouette came into focus. The sharp angles of his jaw, the soft fall of his hair, the way his eyes, dark, unreadable, studied me. There was something intense in the way he watched, something I couldn't quite place. And then, before I could even process what was happening, I felt it. A kiss. Not on my lips, not yet, but soft and lingering on my forehead. My heart lurched. A kiss between friends shouldn't feel like that. Shouldn't steal the air from my lungs or send a surge of warmth curling through my body. I stirred, my pulse pounding in my ears. When I finally forced my eyes open just slightly, I caught the look in his. It was more than affection. It was something deeper, something raw. "Are you awake?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but the way it wrapped around me felt like silk, smooth and intimate. I should have said something. I should have pulled away. But I didn't. I simply nodded, my body betraying the war inside me. And the moment I did, it was like something snapped between us. Chris moved closer, hesitant but determined. And then, his lips brushed against mine. A kiss so delicate it felt almost unreal, like the fleeting touch of a dream. He was testing the waters, giving me time to pull away. But I didn't. Instead, I exhaled, and in that tiny moment of surrender, something inside me crumbled. I kissed him back. The world outside ceased to exist. There were no textbooks, no classes, no responsibilities. Just the heat of his breath against my skin, the soft press of his lips against mine, the intoxicating feeling of giving in to something that had been simmering beneath the surface for far longer than I had realized. Flashes of our time together ran through my mind. Our late-night conversations, the way his hand would linger just a second too long when we brushed against each other. The quiet moments of understanding that had always felt a little too deep for mere friendship. Had I been blind? Had I ignored the signs? Or had we both been too afraid to admit what had been building between us all along? His hands, warm and steady, moved along my skin, hesitant yet urgent. My breath hitched as my own hands found their way to his shoulders, feeling the strength beneath my fingertips. Every nerve in my body was alive, electrified by his touch. My mind should have been screaming with questions. What did this mean? What would happen next? Were we risking our friendship? But for the first time, I didn't care about the consequences, because this wasn't just a kiss. It was an unspoken truth, a quiet confession, a line we had both been towing for far too long. And as he deepened the kiss, as our bodies pressed closer in the dim glow of the night, I realized with absolute certainty, there was no turning back. In those few fleeting seconds, I became acutely aware of my own heartbeat, its rapid rhythm echoing the tangled emotions inside me. Fear and exhilaration wove together, stretching each moment into what felt like an eternity. I was breathless, caught in the delicate space between friendship and the tantalizing possibility of something more. A voice whispered in the back of my mind, urging me forward. What if this wasn't a mistake? What if this kiss was only the beginning? The start of an exploration into something that had been lying dormant for far too long, waiting, aching to be awakened. As dawn's first light broke across the horizon, the world outside slowly stirred to life. The soft glow of the morning sun filtered through the curtains, its warmth creeping across the room, brushing against my skin and pulling me from the haze of sleep. The remnants of my dreams still clung to me, delicate and untouchable, fragments of desires I wasn't yet ready to name. Beside me, Chris lay still, his breathing steady, his features peaceful. But even in sleep, a flicker of tension lingered in the creases of his brow, a silent reminder of the invisible weight pressing down on both of us. I turned onto my side, feigning sleep as I studied him through barely parted eyelids. My heart pounded at the sight of him, at the way his chest rose and fell in slow, measured breaths. But despite the quiet serenity of the morning, an unshakable unease coiled in the air between us. What are we now? Were we still just friends, bound by familiarity and shared spaces? Or had something irreversibly shifted between us, pulling us into unfamiliar and dangerous territory? The unspoken question hung in the silence, lingering between us like an unfinished sentence, demanding an answer I wasn't sure I had. I remained motionless, trapped in the moment, feeling the gravity of his presence like an invisible force pulling me toward him. It was a pull I had been ignoring for far too long. I let my mind drift, recalling the subtle changes between us over the past few weeks, the lingering glances, the way our laughter had taken on a deeper, more intimate note, how his touch, once casual, unthinking, had begun to carry a quiet hesitance, an awareness neither of us wanted to acknowledge. Had he noticed my growing attraction, the way my breath caught whenever he stood too close, the warmth that bloomed in my chest whenever he spoke my name? I bit my lip, willing myself to ignore the rush of heat that crept up my skin. Time stretched between us, and eventually I watched as the tension in his expression melted away. His body relaxed, the weight of dreams fading, and I exhaled softly, feeling my own nerves begin to settle, if only for a brief moment. But that peace was fleeting, because beneath the quiet routine of morning, beneath the way we moved around each other so seamlessly, eating breakfast, exchanging sleepy smiles, pretending nothing had changed, an insatiable hunger simmered just beneath the surface. Every accidental touch sent sparks racing down my spine. Every shared glance felt heavier, charged with unspoken words we were too afraid to say out loud. Each time his fingers brushed against mine while reaching for the same piece of fruit, every moment our shoulders bumped in the small confines of the kitchen, I felt the invisible thread between us tighten, drawing us impossibly closer. I laughed at his jokes, pretended everything was normal, but inside I was unraveling. Could we really go back to the way things were? Or had we already crossed a line we could never retreat from? Days passed and life continued in its quiet, delicate dance, our friendship suspended in a limbo of comfort and fear. But with each passing moment, the gravity between us only grew stronger. I found myself drawn to him in ways I had never allowed myself to acknowledge before. The way his laughter lit up a room, the way he ran his fingers absently through his hair, completely unaware of how effortlessly attractive he was. The way his gaze lingered when he thought I wasn't looking. Each detail, Each tiny, seemingly insignificant moment ignited something inside me. Something dangerous, something undeniable. And then there was that night, the moment that changed everything. Exhaustion had finally caught up with me, and I surrendered to sleep, cocooned in the safety of my blankets. The rhythm of Chris's breathing filled the silence of the room, a steady, comforting presence as I drifted between consciousness and dreams. And in those dreams, reality blurred. I found myself wandering through spaces that felt both familiar and foreign, a landscape shaped by my subconscious, built upon desires I had spent too long suppressing. The barriers between us didn't exist in this world. The walls of friendship crumbled, leaving nothing but raw, unfiltered emotion in their place. In the dream, we weren't just friends. We were something more. I felt his touch, the heat of his hands as they traced invisible patterns against my skin. His fingers entwined with mine, fitting perfectly, as if they had always belonged there. I could taste his lips, warm, insistent, intoxicating. Desire coursed through me, unrestrained, unashamed. Here, in this dreamscape, I had no doubts, no hesitation. I wanted him. I had always wanted him. And for the first time, I allowed myself to accept it. But then, the dream shifted. The fantasy began to warp, twisting and pulling me back into something more real. A shiver ran down my spine as I felt his presence, not just in the dream, but here, in the waking world. The weight of his body beside mine, the warmth of his breath against my skin, the unspoken tension wrapping around us like a tightly wound thread, waiting to snap. And as I drifted in that fragile space between dream and reality, one undeniable truth settled deep in my chest. Something had changed, and there was no going back. As the night stretched on, the weight of my dreams pressed down on me, an intoxicating mix of fantasy and raw emotion, swirling together in the depths of my subconscious. I could still feel his presence lingering at the edge of my awareness, a steady warmth anchoring me between sleep and wakefulness. It was a strange yet familiar sensation, the kind that makes you feel safe and reckless at the same time. I drifted deeper, lost in a world where boundaries no longer existed. Here, in this realm of dreams, we were free. Free to move closer without hesitation, free to surrender to the unspoken tension that had woven itself between us for so long. I felt the soft brush of fingers tracing along my arm, a phantom touch that sent delicious shivers racing down my spine. My body responded instinctively, arching into the sensation, craving more. The dream unfolded like a vivid memory, steeped in longing and desire. I could see him there, just as real as the waking world. His eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my breath hitch. There was no hesitation this time, no second guessing, only the inevitability of our collision. My hands reached for him, fingers tangling in his hair as his lips descended onto mine. The kiss was electric, a silent confession of everything we had kept bottled up for far too long. And yet, as much as I wanted to remain in this perfect illusion, reality had other plans. A sudden jolt, a gentle nudge on my shoulder, pulled me from the depths of my dream. My eyes fluttered open, my heart still hammering against my ribs as I struggled to separate fantasy from the real world. He was watching me. His face was impossibly close, his features bathed in the dim glow of the moonlight. Those familiar eyes held something new, a quiet storm of emotions that made my pulse quicken. There was longing there, yes, but also uncertainty, as if he too had been caught in the same uncharted waters, unsure whether to fight against the current or let it pull us under. "Hey, are you okay?" His voice was hushed, rough with something unspoken. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing, trying to push away the remnants of my dream that still clung to me, like a second skin. But how could I, when he was right there? When the very thing I had been dreaming of was staring back at me with the same burning question in his gaze? I could lie, I could brush it off, pretend like nothing had changed, that we were still just two friends sharing a space, tangled in something neither of us could define. But I was tired of pretending. Instead of answering, I let my fingers move of their own accord, tracing the line of his jaw with a tenderness that felt terrifyingly natural. His breath hitched, so subtle I almost missed it. But I didn't, and that was all the confirmation I needed. I leaned in. The moment our lips met, it was as if the world tilted off its axis. It wasn't a hesitant kiss, not this time. This was something deeper, something desperate, a release of all the tension that had been simmering between us for months, threatening to boil over. His hands found my waist, pulling me closer, and I melted into him, into the warmth of his body, into the taste of something forbidden yet undeniably right. When we finally pulled apart, I was breathless, my skin flushed with heat. His forehead rested against mine, his fingers still tangled in my hair as he let out a shaky exhale. "You were dreaming again," he murmured, his voice barely more than a whisper. "And you know I can't resist joining you in those dreams." A slow, knowing smile curved my lips. "Then maybe it's time we stopped dreaming." His eyes darkened, and in that moment, I knew. This wasn't just a dream anymore. This was real, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of where it would take us. As he pulled me back into another kiss, I surrendered completely, ready to step into the unknown with him by my side. Because whatever lay ahead, whatever came next, we would face it together.